Happy Wednesday, everybody, and hello from the Michigan Science Center. My name is Anna, coming to you from my size Echo Distance Learning Program here in the Echo Studio. Today, we are going to be talking about something pretty topical. We're going to talk about something that's really important and really rooted in great scientific research. We are going to talk about how we can best fight the flu. So we've got some interesting demonstrations to show you. We've got a lot of pictures and information that I'd like to share that I found really interesting about ways we can fight the flu and how we can understand the flu as we go forward in time. If you haven't done so already, go ahead, introduce yourself in the chat feature of wherever you are tuning in live today. I can see Owen is tuning in from West Michigan here on Facebook. Hi, Owen. Thanks so much for joining us. I see some friends starting to pop on in YouTube as well. As always, introduce yourself. Let us know where you're watching from. The chat feature is your best way to communicate with me throughout the program, to answer questions and to ask questions of your own. And I would love if you asked questions, because today's topic is something that I think is super important and relevant in everyday life. Now, yesterday, I actually went out and got my flu shot. It didn't hurt. It was completely painless. And best of all, it was completely free. If you have health insurance, flu shots are always free. If you do not have health insurance and you are looking for a place that you can get a free flu shot or a low-cost flu shot, feel free to send us a message here at the Michigan Science Center. You can send us a Facebook message. You can send us an email to echo@mi-sci.org, and I would be happy to help you find a local resource that will help you to get your own flu shot free of charge, because getting a flu shot or being vaccinated against the virus, the influenza virus, is your best way to protect yourself and to protect others from getting the flu this flu season. And flu season is just kicking off, at least here in Michigan, and it's going to get worse, as it does every year, as the next couple months go on. So we want to be prepared, and my goal today is that we can do a little bit of deep dive into what is the flu and why does getting a vaccine protect us? So I want to start by talking just a little bit about the structure of a virus. And there's a really cool image behind me of a virus. It looks very similar if you've seen an electron microscope image or a visualization of what the coronavirus or COVID-19 looks like. But this one is a little bit different because this is a simulation of the flu virus. They have a lot in common because all viruses share some common characteristics and traits. Most viruses are spherical, but there are all sorts of different shapes that viruses can come in. But most of them are shaped like a sphere or like a ball, or really they're shaped like an icosahedron, which is a 20-sided geometric shape. But they're so small that shape to us appears almost to be a sphere. And that is what we call the viral capsid or the case. But the thing about viruses that is so unique, and the most important feature of a virus, are these viral proteins on the surface. Every virus will have different viral proteins that are coded by the viral genome, which is the DNA in the very center of that cell. So that is very similar to a human cell, right? Where the DNA, the genetic material, the stuff that makes that stuff or that cell, and not a different kind of cell, that's all stored in the very center. That genome codes for these very specific proteins, and those proteins are what make the flu virus very different than the coronavirus or to the Ebola virus. So all viruses will have their own set of viral proteins on their surface, where these proteins can then latch on to a cell like we see here. So you can see that these structural parts of the virus are on the surface. They're proteins. We might also call them antigens. They can actually bind to healthy cells or human cells and invade them or take them over and cause them to be unhealthy. We'll get a little bit more into antibodies as we go through our program here today, but we've already talked about antibodies on a past episode of Echo Live when we talked about blood type. Every blood cell, just like a virus cell, has specific antigens on the surface. Depending on which type of antigens your blood has, we might say that you have A, B, AB, or O type blood. And that's all just named after the different flags or antigens on the surface of your cells. Floating around in your blood are these tiny little puzzle pieces that we call antibodies. And antibodies are able to hook on like a puzzle piece or like a magnet, and they'll stick to those cells. They'll either break them down, or at least they can block them from binding to our healthy human cells. And that's all part of the human immune response. And the human immune response is a really, really interesting process. And thanks to modern advancements in medicine and technology, there is some really amazing videos of our immune system cells at work. So let's take a look at one of those immune cells, or some of these immune cells at work. There's this really amazing YouTube video that is going to show these types of immune cells, which one type of immune cell we would call a natural killer cell. It's a great name, right? Because we want it to kill all the bad stuff or the invaders inside our body. But the good thing about killer cells and most of our immune cells is that they know what types of cells to attack and what types of cells to leave alone. So this is an example of a cancer cell right here, this very kind of long shaped cell. And then the killer cell is actually going to attack it. And this is a real video that was taken under a microscope of these different white blood cells at work. So you can see that it very quickly, even though these are sped up, but they attack these unhealthy cells. So this is a killer cell destroying a cell that was infected by a virus. And those virus particles are those dark colored spots. And so these killer cells will identify a sick or an unhealthy cell, and they'll grab onto them, break them apart, chase them around even inside your bloodstream. And it'll ignore all the healthy cells, which is the most important part of this immune process, is that these cells are selected. They only break down or attack cells that are not part of your body's normal function. And that all, again, has to do with the different antigens and antibodies, for the most part, on the surfaces of your body's cells. So this is a pretty amazing process, and there are all sorts of videos that we've taken using fluorescent dyes, which help us to color the different types of cells. So that's how they've turned certain cells green or red in certain cases. Some of these are simulated using computer programs to help us identify sick versus healthy cells, or immune cells versus blood cells. And they don't use a great technology here on the bottom of our videos. So I highly recommend looking up some of those on YouTube. If you're interested in learning more about the immune system, I would be happy to recommend some resources online. Even the Center for Disease Control, which I'm going to share a lot of information about throughout our program today, has some great resources as well to teach about immunity and how the immune system actually functions. Oh no, can't hear me over the YouTube video. So if we were to do a quick recap, thank you so much for letting me know. Next time, no computer sound on that one. But what we were watching was healthy immune cells attacking unhealthy cells, either cells that had been infected by a virus or were cancerous cells, so cells that are growing at an out of control rate, or other types of cells, but ignoring the healthy cells of our body. So in that one video where the immune cell was chasing around one tiny dark spot, right? That was a great example of an appropriate immune response. It was ignoring the healthy cells. It was ignoring your blood cells or your skin cells or your lung cells, all of the things we want inside our body to do body processes, but attacking those unhealthy cells or those foreign invaders. Now we have a quick game that I'd like to go through together, which I'm calling Seasonal Flu Fact versus Fiction. And I'd really just like to dispel a couple popular myths about the flu and about getting the flu shot, because some of the science around the flu shot can be a bit confusing, and there are some misconceptions that I think we should talk about in the spirit of sharing correct information that comes from scientific resources and experts on the topic. So our first seasonal flu fact versus fiction. Fiction says that getting the flu vaccine can give you the flu because it's made with the live virus, which sounds very scary. And while scientists and immunologists and virologists do get live viruses like the flu or Ebola or coronavirus, in order to create these vaccines, they do a lot of work with the live virus because they need to know how it works in real life when that virus is alive and when it is healthy. However, the flu shot is not made with a live virus. So if you choose to get the flu shot, the injection, that is made with inactivated or killed virus. So that virus is no longer alive, but it does introduce that killed virus into your bloodstream so that you can still form those antibodies, those puzzle pieces that are going to float around through your bloodstream, identify that same type of antigen on the surface of the virus and attack it, destroy it, or at least block it from attacking healthy cells. Now, we do use a small amount of the live virus if you were to choose to get the nasal spray. The nasal spray is a good alternative to the flu shot. It is proven to be just as effective most years, or at least most of the way effective. But that is made with the live virus. So that part is true. However, even using the small amount of live virus from the nasal spray cannot cause the flu. That's because that virus is weakened. So we remove parts of the virus or we partially destroy it. So even though the virus is still technically alive, we say the phrase that it is attenuated or weakened. And so that type of vaccine still cannot give you the flu. Now, there are side effects to getting the flu shot. Some people can get a little bit of a sore arm. I know my arm was sore for about an hour yesterday after I got the vaccine. After that, my sore arm went away. Some people's will last a little bit longer, but you can also get mild symptoms from getting the flu shot. However, you are not getting the flu itself. Getting the flu shot or the nasal spray cannot cause the flu. The next fiction that we should talk about is that the vaccine is the only way to prevent the spread of seasonal flu viruses. Now, while a vaccine is undoubtedly the best way to prevent the seasonal flu from spreading throughout a population, it is not the only way to prevent it. Some people don't build immune responses, and so those people can't actually get the flu shot or the nasal spray because their body just might lack the processes that it needs in order to form the immune cells to attack the virus, or it could cause them to get quite ill if your body doesn't generate the right type of cells. But what about those people? What can those people do, or what can anyone do if you are looking to prevent the flu in other ways? Well, we're already doing some of those things right now because unlike the antigens and the antibodies, which are really, really unique to the seasonal flu or to coronavirus, the way they spread is quite similar. Now, this is a chart that shows the past curve for the seasonal flu by year. And so going from the most recent year up top, so the 2019 to 2020 flu season, 2018, 2017, 2016, getting older as it goes down, except this red line down here, this represents this year's 2020 to 2021 flu season so far. And so far, we are trending slightly below the number of flu cases that we've seen in past years. Now, scientists think this is because we are already taking great steps in order to prevent the flu, even if people haven't necessarily gone out and gotten their flu vaccine yet, because the number of people being vaccinated for the flu is not greatly different so far at this point this year. But the reason scientists think that less people have been presenting with flu-like symptoms yet is because we are wearing masks when we're out in public spaces. We are washing our hands more often to prevent the spread of coronavirus. And we're social distancing. We're staying away from people outside of our immediate household, which limits the amount of opportunities that a virus like the flu has to spread. So if you can't get the flu shot because of a medical reason, thankfully, there are other things you can do to keep yourself safe. And for those of us who can get the flu shot, we can continue to do these same things to protect all those people who cannot get the flu shot and to protect the people who maybe just haven't gotten out to get their flu shot just yet. So continue practicing all these same things, and hopefully this year's flu season will be much more mild than the last 10 or so years. All right, let's try another one. Fiction says that I got a flu shot last year, so I can skip getting this one year, right? Because if I got the flu shot and I built up all those antibodies in my bloodstream, they don't go anywhere. I have them forever. But viruses are highly adaptable. There are many, many new strains of the flu virus every single year. Because viruses are so simple, that allows them to change their genetic code very, very rapidly, even within a year, or sometimes even within one flu season itself. Thankfully, though, scientists work every year to come out with a new vaccine, and every new vaccine vaccinates against 3 or 4 new strains of the flu virus. And so getting this year's flu shot is just as important as getting last year's flu shot, because we are constantly protecting ourselves against the development of new strains of the flu. And so definitely, if you got one last year, that's amazing. Tell your friends how quick and painless it was, and go out and get one again this year. The last fiction for now that I want to talk about is something that I know relates to a lot of people that I love and care about very deeply, is that some people are afraid of needles, and so they don't think they can get vaccinated comfortably. By comfortably, I mean that in their mental health, having a fear of needles is a legitimate fear. It's actually the fear that kills the most people every year, because some people can be so afraid of needles that they won't get necessary medical treatments or even preventative medical treatments like the flu shot. But that nasal spray is an option. Talk to a health professional about whether or not you can use the nasal spray instead of getting the injection if you're afraid of needles. Talk to a health provider about how they can offer that to you. Like we said, most years the nasal spray is proven to be just as effective as the flu shot. For certain age groups, it can be even more effective, but getting the nasal spray is definitely a better bet than getting no vaccination against the flu at all. Now, regardless of which type of vaccine you get, regardless of if you choose to go out and get the flu shot, or if you choose to go out and get the nasal spray, your immune response, the way your body builds up immunity after you get vaccinated, is just about the same. And so I have a demonstration down here to talk about how this immune response works. Now, inside each of these plastic jars is just a small amount of sand. The sand is going to represent all the cells that are floating around in your bloodstream normally. These represent healthy human cells, things like red blood cells, white blood cells, all the cells that your body needs in order to keep on living. Now, what we're going to introduce into each of our jars, each of our different bloodstreams, is an infection, is a virus. And so these iron filings are going to represent that virus. And we'll try to sprinkle about the same amount into each of our jars here. And you'll notice there's a difference in color. And right now, it would be really easy for me to maybe just scoop the virus off the top, right? But unfortunately, it doesn't really work like that in the human body. We can't really just scoop out the virus, because the virus isn't just going to stay in one place. Your blood is constantly pumping. These viruses are multiplying. They are attaching to healthy human cells, and they are propagating that infection. So really, it's going to look something more like this. You'll notice that once I shake, that virus has spread around, is much more spread throughout, and we can't really see it on the surface anymore. We might be able to see a little bit. You can see some darker patches in this one, but for the most part, that virus is now considered to be totally spread throughout our body. But your immune cells are constantly floating around through your bloodstream, trying to identify invaders. And so into our first jar, I have a marble, which is going to represent one of those immune cells. And I'm just going to go ahead and drop it down into our jar. Now, these blood cells are floating around. They're looking for problems. They're doing their job. And this one right now represents a cell that doesn't see anything wrong. And I should have grabbed some tweezers. Now, fun trick for you. If you tap a marble in a jar of sand, you can actually bring it up to the surface. That all has to do with the different size of our particles. But you can see that this marble was just floating around looking for something, and this would signal that nothing was wrong. However, once this healthy blood cell encounters an invader, something like a virus or a cancer cell or something that it is identified as dangerous or foreign, then it gets these little things on the surface of the cell that we call antibodies, right? And these antibodies, this little Y-shaped part of my marble here, is your part that's going to block this type of virus from binding to more cells or to help to break them down in total. So let's go ahead and drop in our new cell. And for this one, I'm going to count how many times we shake the jar. So I'm going to shake the jar about 10 times, and then let's see what happens. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. All right. Now, you might have to do a quick tap, and the object of tapping isn't to add more shakes to it, but just to bring our marble up to the surface. And I think Cassie told us in the chat that the name for this is the Brazil nut phenomena, which is kind of explains why in a can full of nuts, you always seem to be left with all the Brazil nuts. So look that up if you're interested. I can see my marble. I've now brought it to the surface, and what we'll notice is that attached to this marble, and the special thing about this marble was that this is a magnetic marble. And the magnetic marble cling just like a puzzle piece or just like an antibody would, only to our unhealthy cells, only to those iron filings, which represent a cell that has been infected with a virus or the virus itself. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to set this off to the side for now, and we'll do a quick look at this in just a moment, because we have one more system to investigate. Now, the cool thing about these immune cells is once they know they work, once they've identified an invader, these cells will start to multiply. Your body turns into a small factory, making more and more and more of these specific antibodies to attack that virus. So in our last one, I have 3 magnetic marbles. And the goal is, right, that the more of these cells that your body makes, the more antibodies, right, the faster it can clear out a virus from your system or attack it before it's ever able to make you sick at all. So let's shake it about the same amount of times. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. All right. Try to bring it up to the surface. I can see them there. The nice thing about magnets is that they're all going to stick together. All right, we've got 1 immune cell. Set that off to the side. Got a 2nd immune cell, and I'm trying to pick them up very carefully so they hold on to all that virus, that I'm not setting it back down into our bloodstream. 1 more here. All right. So this is actually a pretty great model of the human immune system. And what I'm going to do is switch my camera over here so we can take a look at the results of our experiment. In the results, we can see that in the case of our healthy immune cell, this one didn't pick anything up because we don't have any of those puzzle pieces that help to identify those infected cells. But in our first response, right, this was able to target mostly, at least, just those iron filings or that virus itself. Now, you might notice that there's a small amount of sand, those white kind of particles that were picked up along with it. And that happens in real life too. That happens in the real immune system. These cells aren't perfect. Sometimes they do make mistakes. But if we were to compare the amount of white sand to the amount of iron filings that they pick up, which we can do pretty easily, and maybe if I had done a better job of shaking, it was really more about them being picked up physically than actually attracted to this cell or identified by this cell. But if I go ahead and take off my plastic covering, my easiest way to clean up here, we can see just how much of that virus this one tiny immune cell was able to remove from the blood. And the more of that immune response was triggered, right? The more antibodies that your blood made, the more of that virus it was able to collect in such a short period of time, or the same amount of shakes, right? Take away this marble. Take away this marble. But the system isn't perfect. Sometimes healthy cells do get attacked in the process, but the important thing is that for the most part, these immune cells are only attacking unhealthy or virus cells, that they can tell the difference between what is a target and what is not. And sometimes, like we said, people's immune responses don't work perfectly. Those people are some of the people who may not be able to get the flu shot because either their body doesn't make the correct puzzle pieces at all to collect the virus or attack the virus, or sometimes their immune cells can attack their own body instead of attacking something that is unhealthy, and that would be a bad thing too. So you can see we have way more virus collected over here on this side, even though my virtual background's getting a little funky, than we did with just one immune cell. And so by introducing a flu shot or the nasal spray into your body, right, you're telling your body this is an attacker. And so before you even come in contact with the flu to begin with, your body already knows what to do. You already started making all of these special cells, which are going to help to attack the flu if you do ever come in contact to it. And the goal is that your body could fight it off long before you ever get sick, or more importantly, long before you are ever able to pass the flu along to someone else. All right, let's talk about one last flu fiction before we pause for questions at the end of our program here. The last flu fiction I want to talk about is that I don't need the flu shot. Herd immunity is going to protect me. So we have to talk a little bit about what this means, herd immunity, and why people think that means they don't need to get the flu shot. Herd immunity is exactly what it sounds like. If you're familiar with a herd of animals, you know that we mean a large group of animals. And in herd immunity, you're basically relying on the fact that if enough people get vaccinated, the flu shouldn't make it to me. So I don't really need it because someone else's immunity is going to protect me from getting the flu. But let's see just exactly how that works. So a reason to get a flu shot, right, is because this represents a population where not a lot of people got the flu shot, or not a lot of people were vaccinated against a virus. So you can see that no one in this diagram is vaccinated according to our legend on top. So yellow stick figures would represent someone who got their flu shot this year, or got vaccinated against another virus, and no one did, right? And that means that with just 2 people who got sick and are considered to be contagious or able to spread that sickness to others, that sickness spreads very, very quickly because there are no immunized people to protect each other. Now, let's take a look at a population where we have a few people who got their flu shot, where we got some people who went out and got vaccinated, but still a lot of people who did not. Even though the spread is a little bit less, and at least these yellow stick figures, those people who got their flu shot, at least they're safe. There's still not a whole lot left to protect those not immunized, but still healthy people. And so the virus still spreads pretty quickly across this population. Now, lastly, let's take a look at an example where herd immunity works pretty well. Now, in this population, almost everybody was vaccinated or immunized. And so they can't get sick with the flu and they can't spread the flu to others as long as they're doing a good job washing their hands and not spreading it on the surfaces of objects. But in this population, there are still a few people who were not immunized because maybe they weren't able to. So these blue stick figures over here are not immunized. And you can see that even over time, they have still been protected because these immunized people basically form a barrier between those who are sick and those who are healthy. So this happens in real life. But in order for herd immunity to work, there has to be a certain percentage of the population that gets vaccinated. This is, if it plays, this is a GIF, which I know might come across a little bit glitchy, but it shows based on a percent of the population who gets vaccinated. So it goes from 0% all the way up to 95%. They're showing the same period of time, and the red represents the spread of this infection or the spread of this disease. So you can see that there is a direct correlation between the percent of people who get vaccinated and the lessened number of people who get infected with that disease, even though there are still some flu healthy people here in this population at the 95% vaccinated population, but they're protected. They stay healthy. They don't get sick. Now, the percent of people who have to get vaccinated for herd immunity to work depends on the type of virus or the type of sickness that we're talking about. This number here, this is a kind of complicated graphic, but basically every virus gets classified with a few different types of statistics. And this one is the most important, the R naught. The R naught basically tells us if I were to get sick with this virus and I was in a room and I was just going about my daily life, what is about the average number of people I would pass this on to? So for things like the measles, that number is really high. So if I were to get the measles and I was in a population of other people who didn't get vaccinated for the measles, I could spread that to about 12 to 18 other people, which is a lot. Thankfully, the flu is usually somewhere between 1 to 4 other people. And so you'll see the number of people who have to be vaccinated for the vaccine or herd immunity to work is much less than with things like the measles. So in order for the measles to stay away from us, to stay out of our population like it has been for a very, very long time, people still need to be vaccinated against it. We still need to vaccinate about 92 to 94% of the population in order to keep measles under control for herd immunity to work. With the flu, though, we still need anywhere between 30 to 75%. 75% would be ideal, right? 75% tells us that if 75% of the population here in Michigan were to get vaccinated against the flu, that herd immunity should protect the other 25%, hopefully. Thankfully, the percent of people who get vaccinated for the flu here in the US is pretty promising. Some years better than others. But this is a graph of the percent of the US population that got vaccinated for the flu. But there are other factors that come into play. We talked about the fact that my flu vaccine was free, but other people don't necessarily have access to the same medical treatments or preventative things like flu shots that other people do. And so there is a disparity between different races of people who get the flu shot. So you can see that the number of white people who get the flu shot every year is much higher, according to no matter which year you look at, the number of white people who get the flu shot is much higher than the number of Black people that get the flu shot by a lot, by a great difference in percentage. And this has to do with access to quality medical care, right? Everyone should be getting the flu shot, especially people who live in urban areas, places like cities where you see a lot more people, right? Because there's more people in cities, they're more tightly packed together. And historically and across the country, no matter which urban area you look at, the population in urban areas is much higher. It's a much higher percent of Black people than it is of white people. And so this graph really should be reversed if we were concerned about keeping people healthy as a whole population. Now, this one gives me a little bit of hope because here in Michigan, this graph tells me that in the 2018 to 2019 flu season, that about 44 to 48% of Michigan was vaccinated for the flu, which according to the R naught, this is hopefully enough. It's not 75%, which we said would be ideal, the perfect situation, but this is technically enough where herd immunity was for the most part protecting those people who were not able to get the flu shot. Hopefully this year, even more people go out and get the flu shot and that herd immunity will work much, much better. So I found all these statistics on usafacts.org. They have all sorts of statistics that you can pull. They'll tell you how many people by area, by demographic, by age, which types of people got flu shots and which didn't. And I really just love data. So if you're interested in finding some well-collected data, definitely check them out. But before we part today, I know I said this a couple times, before we part, I don't want to be all doom and gloom because viruses aren't all bad. And that sounds a little bit funny, right? Because normally we think about viruses as something that makes us sick, something we don't like. But viruses aren't all bad. Viruses are very, very unique. They're very special. We talked about how their unique features make them really, really fast at mutating. It also makes them spread very quickly. And we can use that to our advantage as scientists. And so scientists are doing all sorts of work around the world to use viruses as a good thing. Thankfully, we can actually open up viruses. We can edit pieces of that genome or pieces of that DNA to cause these viruses to lose the effects that make people sick, but use them for things that we want them to do. A couple examples of this is that scientists are editing different types of cells, not just viruses, but we call this synthetic biology, where we take a cell or take a piece of something out of nature, we change its DNA or change its genetic code, and then we can make it do something better. We've made plants grow faster or healthier, which has helped populations around the world with access to food in areas where they might have trouble getting things to grow. It's made plants drought resistant. It's made them produce certain vitamins, like a population in Asia was able to be saved from vitamin A deficiency because we found a way to make rice full of vitamin A. So when you hear the phrase GMO or when you hear the phrase synthetic biology, know that scientists are using this to save lives. This is the same way that we're doing things like creating synthetic food flavorings. We're making most sustainable detergents this way. And so viruses are kind of the future of synthetic biology because they're so simple and because they reproduce so quickly. Viruses really are on the cutting edge of how we might save the human race from all sorts of other things. Now, this just about brings us to the end of our program, I promise this time. But I know today was a little bit of an information dump. It's a little bit of information overload. If anyone has any questions, definitely feel free to put them in the chat. I'd be happy to answer as many as I can. And if I can't, I do think that we have an expert on epidemiology and microbiology out there in our audience who might be able to help me. Cassie's already done a great job of answering the question, how many viruses are there? And the answer is lots. Cassie says there are over 320,000 different viruses that infect mammals. People are mammals, right? And so those are maybe the ones we care the most about. But that doesn't include ones that can infect plants or bacteria. But there are all sorts of viruses and they're always mutating all the time, right? So even though we might look at the flu and call it the flu virus, every year there's slightly different flu viruses. And I'm sure that number gets multiplied tenfold or maybe even more when we take into account the different types of virus strains. While we wait for any other questions to come in, as always, let's give a big thank you to Ford and DENSO who have sponsored Echo Live this whole year since the state shut down due to the coronavirus back in March. We'll continue bringing you fun and exciting programs here on Echo Live through the rest of this year. These programs happen on Wednesdays at 2:30 p.m. Eastern. If you're looking for activities that you can try at home, things that are safe and relevant and exciting, check out the Michigan Science Center's website. It's written right down there on the bottom. mi-sci.org/at-home-science is a great reference page for all sorts of resources and activity guides and experiments that you can try at home. Sandra asked a good question. What if my brother got COVID-19? What should I do? That's a great question. I will say that you should definitely check in with a medical professional to get really good advice from them. But there are a few things that everyone should do if you know someone who is exposed to COVID-19 or someone that was actually infected with COVID-19. Number one, you should stay away from them. If you have to provide them direct care because they need you during this time and they're not admitted to the hospital, you should be wearing your face mask, right? You should be washing your hands often. And whenever possible, you should just be staying at least 6 feet away from people who may have been infected with the virus. Hopefully your brother comes back through very, very soon. Most people hopefully will. Statistics tell us that most people will, but we just want everyone to be extra safe. So unless you need to, stay far away, wash your hands often, continue using your hand sanitizer when you can't wash your hands with soap and water. And of course, check in on your brother though. If it's your brother, if it's your mom or your dad or your brother or sister or a friend or your teacher, check in with those people because going through something like coronavirus or even the flu can be very scary. And one of the most important things we can do for others is just making sure that we are being there for them, that we are helping them through this time, making them feel safe, making them know everything's going to be okay, and that they have a team of people around them who are there to help. Good question. All right. Now, if anyone has any other questions, definitely feel free to reach out with us after the show. Otherwise, I hope I'll see you all back here next week, Wednesday at 2:30 p.m. for another episode of Echo Live. Until then, if you haven't done so already, go get your flu shot. Tell me that you got your flu shot. Send me a picture. Do something fun. Celebrate yourself, because doing that is protecting not just you, but everyone else around you. So thanks, everybody. And I'll